In 2007, I heard that my favorite network, the CW, was adapting the Gossip Girl novels into a TV show. A TV show that later ran until December 17th, 2012, and which I never missed an episode of. Largely because I had read the books before the CW adaptation had even been considered. The Gossip Girl pilot was almost exactly like the first Gossip Girl book. It was exactly as I imagined it in a lot of ways. There had been changes, like Lily Vanderwoodson, Chuck Bass, and Rufus Humphrey all having more prominent roles. But in the broad strokes, it was the same as the first novel in the first series of Gossip Girl books. But after that, so many elements changed. Some for the better. Georgina, a relatively minor character in the novels, became a major recurring antagonist. And some for the worst, like how they relegated Vanessa, a major character in the books, into an annoyance, and everything involving Ivy and Charlie was a chop for me. I couldn't help but wonder why the showrunners didn't just follow the template laid out by Cicely von Ziegesar in the books. They had been wildly entertaining and inappropriate for teens, but I felt like there was enough there that there was no need to change anything about the original story. In 2009, at the height of the success of Twilight, the CW released The Vampire Diaries, and I was sad for the whole thing yet again. Funnily enough, I had also read the original books written by L.J. Smith, R.I.P. to L.J. Smith, before the show had come out, so I knew what to expect going into a show. But the TVD show was not exactly what I expected. The characters kind of seemed a little bit off to me. The actors who played Elena and Caroline, based on the descriptions in the books, they felt like they could have been like swapped, and Elena's personality was somewhat changed. Book Elena was a queen bee not unlike Blair Waldorf. And I had always liked her because it was rare that the protagonist of a story was as mean as she was. She was very competitive, and when she saw Stefan, she said, I want it, I got it, and went hard after him. She was an aggressive girl, an alpha, a queen bee. In the case of both shows, I think that neither were actually very good adaptations of their source materials. While I enjoyed them for what they were far from one-to-one adaptations of the stories that I had read in book form. And then it hit me. Live-action adaptations of beloved media aren't meant to really be adaptations. They're fanfiction, but with a much bigger budget. I'm Charlotte, but you can call me Charlie if you're nasty, and I'm a non-binary femme who loves to not just consume media, but analyze it and even generate it through my own creative means. If you like what you see here, please do all the online stuff, like, share, follow, and get into this crazy mind of mine. While it feels unnecessary to have to define something like fanfiction, I do think that definitions matter. And this is a pseudo-intellectual, pseudo-educational channel. So what is fanfiction? Cambridge defines fanfiction as stories written about TV, film, or book characters by their fans. I mean, simple enough, right? We all know the story of the fanfic that made it big. The myth, the legend, 50 Shades of Grey, which started off as a smutty Twilight fanfic, but then grew into its own thing. But if you're familiar enough with Twilight, the books, and maybe even the films, you see the influences all over that series. Fanfiction, while generally harmless, has its detractors. It's been accused of being derivative, and to some extent, attempting to imitate the style of an author can be difficult to do. Anne Rice might be considered one of the earliest pioneers of the vampire craze in the last century, but you can see the influence of Dracula on her most famous character, Lestat. While he's not an exact replica of Dracula, the idea of an aristocratic and powerful vampire leaving one place to come to another and manipulating and abusing those he fixates on is classic Dracula. Whether intentionally or not, I can draw a line from Dracula to Lestat and Lestat to Klaus Michelson from The Vampire Diaries with ease. Which is ironic given the fact that Anne Rice was famously against fanfiction. So much so that she was against her works having a section on fanfiction.net. But when we watch live-action adaptations of our favorite works, we never think of them as fanfiction, especially if the creator is there in a producing capacity. It feels as if it adds canonicity to the adaptation, but that doesn't automatically mean that it will be good. George R.R. Martin was a part of Game of Thrones' entire run, and look at how terrible its final season was. Not necessarily because of him, though the show noticeably dipped in quality once there was no more of his book material to adapt, but because the writers and executive producers wanted to, well, do their own thing. That's very fanfiction-y. Once I began to accept live-action adaptations as fanfiction, it allowed me to accept a lot of things with ease. I've been a long-time comic book fan and I still read many titles, but my approach to the Marvel Cinematic Universe now is way less about how well it aligns with my understanding of the characters in the books and more to do with the production's version of those characters and whether the stories and characters work on their own. The trap I think a lot of us fall into is if I had the rights to adapt this work, I would do this. I really enjoyed the new Interview with the Vampire series, the TV show, and was excited when they announced that they would also be making Mayfair Witches. While I had never read it myself, I had heard about it over the years and I wanted to give the show a go as I'm partial to anything with a witch in it. The first season was serviceable and the second season was better. Neither was particularly impressive. So I was curious about what happened in the actual books that the show is based on, and I found myself asking, why did the producers of the show not adapt this storyline? Why did they choose to make the show this way? Why did they remove this part? Like I said, it's a very easy trap to fall into, sitting back and criticizing someone else's work. I often struggle with calling any creative endeavor trash. Just because I didn't like it, I'd rather say it wasn't for me or I was in the target audience. While I had a lot of problems with Mayfair Witches as an adaptation of the novel series Lives of the Mayfair Witches, I also think it's worth noting that Lives has a lot of its own problems. It's not a perfect work. In fact, as a trilogy, it's often rather sloppy, and in some ways the AMC show is an improvement. Anne Rice often exposition dumps in the last third of each book in the series, and those were my favorite parts because I really love world building and lore and background information. Other readers prefer more subtle ways of delivering that kind of information. Little of Anne Rice's world building made it into the show though, but that's because a book and a show are very different forms of media, and what you could do in one, you simply can't really do in the other. Ultimately, I think it's better for you as a viewer if you go into an adaptation of a beloved book with an open mind. While it's inevitable that you'd compare the book to the show or to the film, I do think being able to criticize it as its own form of fanfiction will make it a more enjoyable experience for you. If you keep tracking how book accurate it is, you'll never be able to look at the show for what it actually is. You'll always be looking at the show for what it could have been. I know what you're thinking. If it's not a proper adaptation, then why are they using the name? Of course, the answer is to capitalize on the existing fandom and get eyeballs on their show. It's a Trojan horse. I don't even think the Vampire Diaries was even trying to adapt the novels all that much. I just think Alloy Entertainment or whoever had the production rights wanted to give Twilight fans something to nibble on between films. This video isn't meant to change your mind and make you think that a bad show based on a good book is automatically good. You might simply not like it, and that's okay too. But I think the next time your favorite book series is being adapted, adjust your thinking a bit and anticipate changes, some good, some bad, and judge it on its own merits. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff, and we'll talk again soon.